The canvas stretched before Evelyn Nash was the only thing standing between her and complete ruin. But her hands refused to stop shaking as she tried to paint the Texas sunset that blazed across the Fort Davis sky in the summer of 1878. She had set up her makeshift display outside the general store on a Saturday afternoon when the ranchers and cowboys came into town for supplies. 6 paintings leaned against the wooden storefront, each one a piece of her heart rendered in oil and pigment. The doctor's bill for her younger brother sat folded in her pocket, a constant reminder that she needed $300 by the end of the month or Thomas would lose the leg that infection was slowly claiming. The town physician had been patient, but even his charity had limits. Evelyn wiped her palms on her already paint-stained apron and stepped back to examine her work. The landscape before her captured the raw beauty of West Texas, the way the light turned the desert mountains into something almost holy. She had always seen the world differently than most people, finding beauty in the harsh landscape that others called desolate. Her mother had encouraged that vision before the fever took her 2 years ago, telling Evelyn that her gift for seeing light and shadow was something precious. A group of ranch hands wandered past, glancing at her paintings with mild interest but not stopping. Evelyn tried not to let disappointment show on her face. She had been out here for 3 hours and had sold exactly nothing. A woman trying to sell artwork in a frontier town was already an oddity, and most people considered paintings a luxury when they were worried about water rights and cattle prices. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains when Evelyn heard the jingle of spurs approaching. She looked up to see a tall man walking toward her display with an easy, confident stride that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin. He wore dusty trail clothes, a hat that had seen better days, and a gun belt that hung low on his hips in the manner of someone who knew how to use it. His face was tanned from long hours under the Texas sun, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting at distant horizons. Quinton Bishop stopped in front of her paintings and stood there for a long moment, studying each one with an intensity that made Evelyn's pulse quicken. Most people barely glanced at her work, but this cowboy was really looking, his dark eyes moving from canvas to canvas with genuine interest. "You paint all these yourself?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone born and raised in Texas. "Yes, sir," Evelyn replied, standing a little straighter. "Each one is original. I specialize in landscapes of the local area." Quinton crouched down to get a better look at a painting of the rocky terrain near the fort, where massive boulders created natural fortifications that had given the town its name. "This is Devil's Canyon," he said, not a question but a statement of recognition. "You got the light just right, the way it hits those rocks in the early morning." Evelyn felt a flush of pleasure at his understanding. "You know the area well." "Should. I run cattle through there twice a year, moving between summer and winter pasture." He straightened up and looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were a deep brown, almost black, and held an intelligence that surprised her. "How much for this one?" $15, Evelyn said, trying to keep her voice steady. It was a fair price, though she would have taken less if pressed. She needed the money desperately. Quinton nodded slowly, then turned his attention to the other paintings. He studied each one with the same careful attention, occasionally asking questions about where she had painted them or what time of day she had captured. Evelyn found herself relaxing as they talked, his genuine interest making it easy to discuss her work. "I will take all of them," Quinton said suddenly, reaching into his vest pocket. Evelyn blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry, what?" "All 6 paintings. I want to buy them all." He pulled out a leather wallet and began counting bills. "That comes to $90 if my arithmetic is right." "But "Why would you need 6 paintings?" Evelyn asked, too shocked to maintain her professional composure. Quinton smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. "I just finished building a house on my ranch. Been working on it for 2 years, getting every detail right. Now the walls are bare and it feels empty. These paintings, they capture what I love about this land. They belong in that house." Evelyn watched as he counted out $90 in bills and coins, more money than she had seen in months. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the payment. "Thank you," she managed to say. "You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I might," Quinton said gently. "You would not be selling paintings on the street if times were easy. Can you deliver them to the Bishop Ranch? It is about 10 miles north of town, past the old mission ruins." "Of course, I can bring them out tomorrow if that suits you," Evelyn said, her mind already calculating how much more she needed for Thomas's surgery. Quinton adjusted his hat, preparing to leave, then paused. "Those paintings are real good, miss. You have got a talent for capturing this land. Most people just see dust and rocks, but you see the beauty in it. That is a rare thing." As he started to walk away, Evelyn called out impulsively, "Wait. If you need paintings for your house, I could do more. Custom work if you tell me what you want to see. I could paint specific locations on your ranch or anything else you might like." Quinton turned back, his expression thoughtful. "You do commissions?" "Yes, absolutely. I could come out to your ranch, see the land, and paint what you want. My rates are fair and I work quickly." He studied her for a long moment, and Evelyn felt her cheeks warm under his scrutiny. "All right," he said finally. "Come out tomorrow with these paintings and we will discuss what else I might want. I will pay you for your time either way." After he left, Evelyn carefully wrapped the paintings in brown paper, her hand still shaking slightly from the encounter. $90 was more than she had dared hope for, but it was still not enough for Thomas's surgery. If she could secure a commission from this cowboy, though, she might actually have a chance at saving her brother's leg. That evening, she sat by Thomas's bedside in the small room they rented above the seamstress shop, carefully counting her money. Thomas was 17, tall and gangly in the way of teenage boys, with their father's sandy hair and their mother's green eyes. The infection in his leg had started from a simple accident, a nail through his boot while working at the stable, but it had festered despite their best efforts to treat it. "How much did you make?" Thomas asked, his face pale against the pillow. $90, Evelyn said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "A rancher bought all 6 paintings." Thomas's eyes widened. "All of them? Evelyn, that is amazing. And he wants to commission more work." "I am going out to his ranch tomorrow to discuss it. If I can get enough commissions, we will have the money for your surgery." Her brother's expression grew troubled. "You should not have to do this for me. Maybe I should just accept that the leg is not worth saving. Dr. Morrison said I could learn to get around with a crutch." "Do not talk like that," Evelyn said firmly, taking his hand. "You are 17 years old, Thomas. You have your whole life ahead of you. That leg is worth saving, and I am going to make sure you get the treatment you need." The next morning, Evelyn borrowed a wagon from the livery owner who was sweet on her and loaded the 6 wrapped paintings carefully into the back. She had dressed in her best day dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and pinned her dark hair into a neat bun. First impressions mattered, especially when trying to secure more work. The ride to the Bishop Ranch took her through some of the most beautiful country she had ever seen. The road wound through rocky canyons and past stands of juniper trees, with mountains rising in the distance. Evelyn found herself mentally composing paintings, cataloging the play of light and shadow across the landscape. The ranch itself, when she finally reached it, was impressive. A sturdy adobe house sat on a rise overlooking a valley where cattle grazed peacefully. Outbuildings dotted the property, all well-maintained and organized. This was clearly a successful operation, run by someone who knew what they were doing. Quinton emerged from the barn as she pulled up, wiping his hands on a rag. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his dark hair damp as though he had recently washed. "Miss Nash," he greeted her with a slight nod. "You found the place all right." "Your directions were clear," Evelyn said, climbing down from the wagon. "And please call me Evelyn." "Miss Nash makes me feel like a schoolteacher." He smiled at that. "Then you should call me Quinton. Let me help you with those paintings." Together they carried the wrapped canvases into his house, and Evelyn caught her breath when she stepped inside. The interior was beautiful, with thick adobe walls that kept the space cool despite the summer heat. Large windows let in natural light, and the furniture, while sparse, was well made and comfortable looking. But Quinton was right that the walls were bare, crying out for something to make the space feel like a home. "I built most of it myself," Quinton said, watching her reaction. "Hired some help for the heavy work, but I wanted to do it right. This is meant to be a house that lasts, not just a bachelor's shack." They spent the next hour hanging the paintings, moving them around until Quinton was satisfied with the placement. Evelyn noticed how particular he was about getting everything just right, the same careful attention to detail he had shown when studying her work yesterday. "You have a good eye," she observed as they stepped back to admire a landscape now hanging above the fireplace. "My mother was an artist," Quinton said quietly. "Nothing professional like you, but she was always drawing and painting. She died when I was 12, but I remember how she would talk about composition and light. Some of it must have stuck." "I am sorry about your mother," Evelyn said softly. "It was a long time ago, but I think she would have liked your work." He turned to face her. "Let me show you around the ranch, and you can tell me if you see anything worth painting." They spent the rest of the morning riding across the property on horses from Quinton's stable. He was an excellent guide, pointing out landmarks and explaining the history of the land. The Bishop Ranch had been in his family for 20 years, since his father had claimed the land and built the original homestead. Quinton had taken over 5 years ago after his father's death, and had been steadily building it into one of the most successful cattle operations in the area. Evelyn found herself enjoying his company more than she had expected. Quinton was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. He listened when she talked about her painting, asking intelligent questions and seeming genuinely interested in her process. By the time they stopped for lunch near a creek that ran through the property, she felt more comfortable with him than she had with most people she had known for years. "This spot right here," Evelyn said, standing on the creek bank and looking at the way the water reflected the surrounding cottonwood trees. "This would make a beautiful painting. The light through the leaves, the movement of the water. It is perfect." Quinton leaned against a tree, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Then paint it. I will commission 12 more paintings from you, different views of the ranch. I will pay you $20 apiece for them." Evelyn turned to stare at him. $20. "That is more than I asked for the ones you already bought. Those were already painted. This is custom work and it will take time and effort. $20 is fair." He pushed away from the tree and walked closer. "But I have a condition. You need to come out here to paint them. You cannot capture this place properly from memory or quick sketches. You need to be here, see how the light changes throughout the day. Come out here regularly," Evelyn repeated, her mind racing. 12 paintings at $20 each would be $240. Combined with what he had already paid her, it would be enough for Thomas's surgery and leave some left over. I have a guest room you can use if you need to stay overnight to catch early morning or evening light. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives in one of the outbuildings with her husband who works for me. It would all be proper and respectable. Evelyn knew she should probably consider this more carefully, think about the propriety of spending time alone with a man she barely knew. But the image of Thomas lying in bed, his face drawn with pain, pushed aside any hesitation. "All right," she said. "I accept your commission. When would you like me to start? As soon as you are able. I will pay you half up front and half upon completion of each painting." They shook hands on the deal, and Evelyn felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was a man who worked hard for everything he had, and she respected that. She understood it, because she was doing the same thing. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn fell into a routine. She would arrive at the ranch early in the morning, often before dawn, to catch the light she wanted. Quinton always seemed to be awake already, working with his cattle or mending fences, but he would stop what he was doing to make sure she had everything she needed. Sometimes he would ride out with her to the location she had chosen, helping her carry her supplies and setting up her easel. They talked while she painted, conversations that ranged from the mundane details of ranch life to deeper discussions about dreams and regrets. Evelyn learned that Quinton had never wanted to be anything but a rancher, that this land was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. He learned that she had been supporting herself and Thomas since their mother's death, taking any work she could find while trying to pursue her passion for painting. "You should be in a big city," Quinton said one afternoon as he watched her work on a painting of his cattle grazing against a mountain backdrop. "New York or Boston, places where people appreciate real art." "Maybe someday," Evelyn said, mixing colors on her palette. "But Thomas needs me here right now. And besides, I am not sure I want to leave. There is something about this land that speaks to me. Every time I think I have captured it, I see something new that I want to paint." "I know what you mean," Quinton said softly. "That is how I feel about ranching. Every day is different. Every season brings new challenges. I never get tired of it." As the days passed, Evelyn began to notice things about Quinton that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. The way his face lit up when he talked about his horses. The gentleness in his hands when he handled a newborn calf. The respect his ranch hands showed him, not from fear but from genuine admiration. He was a good man, she realized, the kind of man who kept his word and treated people fairly. She also could not help noticing the physical things. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck when it got too long, the rare, brilliant smile that transformed his usually serious face. She tried to push those thoughts aside, reminding herself that this was a professional relationship, that she needed the money from his commissions and nothing more. But her heart was not listening to her practical mind. One evening, Evelyn was working on a sunset painting, trying to capture the moment when the sky turned the color of fire. She had stayed later than usual, absorbed in her work, and had not noticed how quickly the light was fading until Quinton appeared with a lantern. "You are going to ruin your eyes working in this light," he said, setting the lantern down near her easel. "Just a few more minutes," Evelyn murmured, adding a touch of gold to the clouds. "I almost have it." Quinton moved to stand behind her, looking over her shoulder at the canvas. She could feel the warmth of him, smell the scent of leather and horses and something uniquely him. Her hand wavered slightly, and she had to force herself to concentrate on the painting. "It is beautiful," Quinton said quietly. "You make this place look like something from a dream." "I just paint what I see," Evelyn replied, though her voice came out slightly breathless. "No, you paint what you feel. There is a difference." He reached out and gently touched the canvas, careful not to disturb the wet paint. You put emotion into every brushstroke. Anyone can learn technique, but what you have, that is a gift." Evelyn set down her brush and turned to look at him. In the lantern light, his face was all shadows and angles, his dark eyes intense as they met hers. "Quinton," she began, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. "I should let you finish," he said, stepping back. "Mrs. Chen has supper ready up at the house. Will you join me?" They had shared meals before, casual lunches or quick breakfasts, but something about this invitation felt different, more deliberate. "I should probably head back to town," Evelyn said, though she did not move to pack up her supplies. "You could stay in the guest room tonight," Quinton suggested. "Get an early start tomorrow. You said you wanted to paint the sunrise from the East Ridge." Evelyn knew she should refuse. She had already pushed the boundaries of propriety by spending so much time alone with him. But Thomas was safely under Dr. Morrison's care for the evening, and the thought of the long ride back to Fort Davis in the dark was unappealing. "All right," she heard herself say. "Thank you." Dinner was a quiet affair, served by Mrs. Chen, who gave Evelyn a knowing look that made her blush. The older woman had been nothing but kind to Evelyn, but she clearly had opinions about the amount of time her employer was spending with the pretty painter. After the meal, Quinton suggested they sit on the porch to enjoy the cool evening air. They settled into rocking chairs, the comfortable silence between them filled with the sounds of the night, crickets chirping and the distant call of a coyote. "Can I ask you something personal?" Quinton said after a while. "I suppose so," Evelyn replied cautiously. "Why are you really doing all this? You work yourself to exhaustion between painting and taking care of your brother. You could have left him in the care of others, gone to a city where you could make real money with your art." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Thomas is all the family I have left. When our mother died, I promised her I would take care of him, and I do not see it as a burden. He is my brother and I love him. You do what you have to do for the people you love. Even if it means sacrificing your own dreams. My dreams can wait. His life cannot." She turned to look at Quinton. "You did the same thing, did you not? Took over this ranch when your father died instead of doing whatever else you might have wanted. But I wanted the ranch. It was never a sacrifice. And taking care of Thomas is not a sacrifice for me. It is just what you do." Evelyn paused, then added softly, "Though I will admit, the money from your commissions has made things much easier. Dr. Morrison agreed to do Thomas's surgery next week. We finally have enough to pay for it." Quinton leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. "Why did you not tell me it was that urgent? I would have paid you more or paid you faster." "Because I did not want charity. I wanted to earn the money honestly through my own work." She met his eyes steadily. "My pride might be foolish, but it is all I have sometimes." "It is not foolish," Quinton said quietly. "I understand pride. It is what keeps us going when everything else falls apart." He stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the darkened landscape. "Evelyn, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "I did not need 12 more paintings. Truth be told, the 6 I bought from you were more than enough to fill the walls of this house." He turned to face her. "I commissioned the extra work because I wanted an excuse to see you again, to spend time with you." Evelyn rose from her chair, her legs feeling shaky. "Quinton, I know I should not be saying this. You are here to work and I have no right to complicate things. But I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about cattle prices and water rights. I look forward to your visits more than I should. And when you are here, painting under the cottonwoods or riding across the ranch, this place feels more like a home than it ever has." She crossed the porch to stand in front of him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I look forward to coming here too," she admitted. At first it was just about the money, about helping Thomas, but somewhere along the way it became about more than that. It became about seeing you. Quinton reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, and Evelyn leaned into the touch. "I am not good with words," he said softly. "I am better with actions, with working hard and seeing things through. But I want you to know that what I feel for you is real. It is not a passing fancy or a lonely man's wishful thinking." "I know," Evelyn whispered. "I feel it too." When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, a question rather than a demand. Evelyn answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back, pouring into it all the feelings she had been trying to deny for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably talk about this," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. "Probably," Evelyn agreed, but she did not move away from him. They talked for hours that night, sitting close together on the porch, hands intertwined. They discussed their hopes and fears, their pasts and their possible futures. Quinton told her about the loneliness of running a ranch alone, how he had convinced himself that he did not need anyone else as long as he had the land and his work. Evelyn shared her worries about Thomas, her guilt over sometimes resenting the responsibility of caring for him, her dreams of one day being recognized as a serious artist. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked as the moon rose high above them. "I suppose that depends on what you want," Quinton said carefully. "I know I want to court you properly if you will let me, get to know you better, spend time together, see where this takes us." "I would like that," Evelyn said, "but I need to be honest with you. Right now, Thomas has to be my priority. His surgery is next week, and he will need months of recovery. I cannot promise you much of my time or attention until he is better." "I would never ask you to choose between your brother and me," Quinton said firmly. "Family comes first." "That is how it should be. But I can be patient, Evelyn. I have waited this long to feel something real for someone. I can wait a little longer." The surgery happened on a Tuesday morning, and Evelyn spent the entire time pacing in the doctor's waiting room, too anxious to sit still. Quinton had insisted on coming with her, closing the ranch for the day to provide support. He did not say much, but his presence was steadying, a solid anchor in a sea of worry. When Dr. Morrison finally emerged, looking tired but satisfied, Evelyn nearly collapsed with relief. "The surgery went well," the doctor reported. "I was able to remove all the infected tissue and save the leg. He will need time to heal and probably walk with a slight limp, but he should make a full recovery otherwise." Evelyn burst into tears, all the tension and fear of the past months finally releasing. Quinton pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried, murmuring reassurances into her hair. When she finally pulled herself together, she was able to see Thomas, who was still groggy from the laudanum but managed a weak smile when she entered the room. "Did it work?" he asked. "It worked," Evelyn said, taking his hand. "You are going to be fine, Thomas." "Good," he mumbled, his eyes already closing. "Because I have plans. Going to learn to be a ranch hand, make my own way. Cannot do that without both legs." After Thomas fell asleep, Evelyn and Quinton walked back to his wagon in the late afternoon sun. "Thank you for being here," Evelyn said. "It meant a lot to have you with me." "There is nowhere else I would have been," Quinton replied. He helped her into the wagon, then climbed up beside her. "Listen, I have been thinking. Thomas is going to need care during his recovery. Your room above the seamstress shop is not exactly ideal for someone who cannot manage stairs." "I know," Evelyn said with a sigh. "I have been trying to figure out what to do. Maybe I can convince the landlord to let us use the back room temporarily. Or you could both come stay at the ranch, Quinton said. I have plenty of space and the guest room is on the ground floor. Mrs. Chen is experienced with caring for invalids. Her husband broke his leg a few years back, and she nursed him through the recovery. Evelyn turned to stare at him. Quinton, we could not possibly impose like that. It is not an imposition if I am offering. And before you say anything about propriety, remember that Mrs. Chen and her husband live on the property. You would have chaperones. It would all be perfectly respectable. But why would you do this? You have already done so much for us. Quinton reached over and took her hand. Because I care about you, Evelyn. Because I want to help. And because that house of mine finally started to feel like a home when you were in it, and I would like to have that feeling a little longer. She squeezed his hand, torn between pride and practicality. The truth was, caring for Thomas during his recovery was going to be difficult in their tiny rented room. The ranch offered space, fresh air, and the kind of quiet that would be conducive to healing. And if she was being completely honest with herself, the prospect of seeing Quinton every day instead of having to find excuses to visit the ranch was appealing. All right, she said finally, but only until Thomas is well enough to manage on his own, and I insist on continuing to paint. I can finish the commission pieces and start selling more work to pay you back for your hospitality. You do not owe me anything, Quinton said, but he was smiling. But I will not stop you from painting. I imagine I will enjoy watching you work. They moved to the ranch 3 days later, when Dr. Morrison said Thomas was well enough to travel. Quinton had arranged everything, setting up the guest room with a comfortable bed and everything Thomas might need during his recovery. Mrs. Chen had prepared enough food to feed an army, and her gentle efficiency quickly put both Evelyn and Thomas at ease. The first few weeks were challenging. Thomas was in considerable pain as he healed, and there were days when infection threatened to return, sending Evelyn into panics that only Quinton's calm presence could soothe. But slowly, steadily, Thomas began to improve. He started sitting up, then standing with assistance, then taking his first tentative steps with crutches. During this time, Evelyn and Quinton's relationship deepened in small, quiet ways. He would sit with her in the evenings after Thomas had gone to sleep, and they would talk about everything and nothing. He taught her about the ranch, explaining the intricacies of cattle management and the challenges of maintaining a successful operation in the harsh Texas climate. She told him about her artistic process, why she chose certain colors or compositions, what she was trying to convey with each piece. Sometimes they would ride out together, Evelyn bringing her sketchbook to capture ideas for future paintings. Quinton was always attentive, pointing out views he thought she might like, but never pushing. He seemed to understand instinctively when she needed space to create and when she needed company. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after they had moved to the ranch, Evelyn was painting by the creek when Quinton rode up on his horse. He dismounted and walked over to her easel, studying the canvas in progress. "Is that me?" he asked with surprise. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm. She had not meant for him to see this particular painting yet. It was a departure from her usual landscapes, a portrait of Quinton working with one of his horses. She had sketched it from memory, trying to capture the quiet strength she saw in him, the way he moved with such purpose and grace. "It is a work in progress," she said defensively. "I am not used to painting people. It is probably terrible." "It is not terrible, it is amazing." Quinton crouched beside her chair, his eyes moving between her face and the canvas. "Is this really how you see me?" "Yes," Evelyn admitted softly. "You are one of the best men I have ever known, Quinton. I wanted to try to capture that somehow." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "I love you," he said simply. I know it might be too soon to say it, but I am not good at hiding what I feel. I love you, Evelyn Nash. I think I have loved you since that first day when you were trying so hard to be brave even though you were scared. Evelyn set down her brush with shaking hands. I love you too, she whispered. I have been trying not to admit it, even to myself. Everything happened so fast, and I was worried it was not real, that I was just grateful for your help. But it is real. What I feel for you is very real. Quinton stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. Marry me, he said against her hair. I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards, but I am 31 years old, Evelyn. I know what I want, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up every morning and see your paintings on my walls. I want to watch you create and support your dreams. I want to build a family with you, a real home filled with love and laughter. Yes, Evelyn said, pulling back to look at him. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Fort Davis. Thomas stood as Evelyn's witness, still using a crutch but growing stronger every day. Several of Quinton's ranch hands attended, along with Mrs. Chen and her husband, and a few people from town who had gotten to know Evelyn through her artwork. Evelyn wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Quinton had picked for her that morning. He wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothing, but his eyes never left her face during the ceremony. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. Walking back down the aisle as Mrs. Quinton Bishop, Evelyn felt a happiness so complete it was almost overwhelming. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than seemed possible. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, preparing dishes that represented both her Chinese heritage and traditional Texas fare. The ranch hands produced fiddles and guitars, and there was dancing as the sun set over the mountains. Thomas pulled Evelyn aside during a break in the festivities. At 17, he was nearly a man, tall and lean with their father's build. "Are you happy?" he asked seriously. "Happier than I have been in a very long time," Evelyn assured him. "Good. Because Quinton is a good man, but if he ever hurts you, I will find a way to make him regret it, bad leg or not." Evelyn laughed and hugged her brother tightly. "He will not hurt me, but thank you for the thought." "I have been thinking," Thomas continued. "Once I am fully healed, I am going to look for work. Quinton said he could use another hand on the ranch, but I do not want you to think I am taking advantage. I will earn my keep. Thomas, you are family. You will always have a place with us. I know, and I am grateful. But I need to make my own way, Evelyn. You spent years taking care of me. Now it is time I stood on my own feet, literally and figuratively." That night, after all the guests had gone home or settled into the bunkhouse, Quinton carried Evelyn over the threshold of their house. He set her down gently in the front room, surrounded by her paintings that now decorated every wall. "Welcome home, Mrs. Bishop," he said softly. "It feels like home," Evelyn replied, looking around at the space that had once seemed empty but now felt warm and lived in. "Thank you for this, Quinton, for everything. You gave me more than just commissions or a place to stay. You gave me a future I did not dare dream about." "You gave me something too," Quinton said, pulling her close. "You made this house a home. You brought color and beauty into my life. And you loved me, which is more than I ever thought I deserved." Their first year of marriage was filled with adjustments and joy in equal measure. Evelyn continued to paint, her work gaining recognition throughout the region. Word spread about the talented artist living at the Bishop Ranch, and she began receiving commissions from wealthy ranchers and businessmen throughout West Texas and beyond. Quinton built her a proper studio in one of the outbuildings, with large windows that let in northern light and plenty of space for her supplies. Thomas recovered fully from his surgery and became one of Quinton's most reliable ranch hands. He had a natural talent with horses and a work ethic that impressed even the most experienced cowboys. He and Quinton developed a close relationship, the kind of easy friendship between men who respected each other. Evelyn was grateful that her husband and brother got along so well. The following spring, Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinton one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction despite knowing he wanted children. His response was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, as though he could not quite believe it. "We are really having a baby." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Evelyn found it difficult to paint during the last few months when she could no longer stand at her easel for long periods. Quinton would sit with her while she did sketches in charcoal, discussing names and making plans for the nursery. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1880, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him James after Quinton's father, and from the moment Evelyn held him, she understood the depth of love her own mother must have felt. Quinton was a devoted father, often walking the floor with James at night when the baby was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his rough but gentle voice. Watching him with their son, Evelyn fell in love with him all over again. When James was 6 months old, Evelyn received a letter that would change everything. A gallery owner from Santa Fe had somehow heard about her work and wanted to display her paintings in an exhibition featuring Western artists. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind of recognition she had always dreamed about. But it meant traveling to Santa Fe for the opening, being away from James and Quinton for at least a week. Evelyn agonized over the decision, torn between her artistic ambitions and her desire to be with her family. "Go," Quinton said when she expressed her concerns. "This is your chance, Evelyn. James and I will be fine. Mrs. Chen will help with the baby, and it is only a week. You have to do this." "Come with me," Evelyn suggested. "We could make it a family trip." But Quinton shook his head. "This is your accomplishment, your moment. You do not need me tagging along. Besides, it is calving season. I cannot leave the ranch right now." In the end, Evelyn went to Santa Fe, though she cried when saying goodbye to James and Quinton. The exhibition was a tremendous success. Her paintings of the Texas landscape captivated viewers, and she sold several pieces for prices that made her head spin. The gallery owner asked if she would be interested in a solo exhibition the following year. But despite the success, Evelyn found herself counting the days until she could go home. She missed Quinton's steady presence, the weight of James in her arms, the familiar landscape of the ranch. Success was sweet, but it meant nothing without the people she loved to share it with. When she finally returned to Fort Davis, Quinton and James were waiting at the station. Her son had grown in just a week, it seemed, and Quinton looked tired but happy. He kissed her thoroughly, right there in public, making her blush and laugh. "Welcome home," he said. "We missed you." "I missed you too, both of you so much." That night, after James was asleep, Evelyn told Quinton about the exhibition, about the sales and the offer for a solo show. "But I have been thinking," she said. "I do not need to be a famous artist to be happy. What I have here with you and James, that is more than enough." "Do not say that," Quinton replied firmly. "You are talented, Evelyn. You deserve recognition for your work. We will figure out a way to make both things work, your art and our family. You should not have to choose." "But I am choosing," Evelyn said softly. I am choosing this life, this family. The painting will always be there. But James is only going to be a baby once, and I do not want to miss it chasing after something that feels less important now than it once did. They compromised. Evelyn continued to paint and take commissions, but she turned down opportunities that would take her away from the ranch for extended periods. She focused on building a reputation locally, becoming known throughout Texas for her landscapes. It was not the international fame she might have achieved, but it was satisfying in its own way. Thomas, now 20 years old, announced his engagement to the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Sarah was a sweet, practical girl who loved the land as much as Thomas did. They were married that summer in a ceremony that reminded Evelyn of her own wedding. Simple and heartfelt, Quinton built them a small house on the far edge of the ranch property, and Thomas continued to work as his right-hand man. Watching her brother settle into his own life, happy and healthy, Evelyn felt a sense of completion. She had kept her promise to their mother. Thomas was going to be all right. 2 years later, Evelyn gave birth to their daughter, Emma. She was a quiet baby, unlike her boisterous brother, with her mother's dark hair and her father's serious eyes. Quinton doted on her shamelessly, this tiny girl who had him wrapped around her finger from day one. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Quinton's management, becoming one of the most successful operations in West Texas. Evelyn's paintings decorated not just their own walls but homes throughout the region and beyond. James and Emma grew up running wild across the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinton surprised Evelyn with a gift. He led her to the barn, where a wagon sat covered with canvas. When he pulled the canvas away, Evelyn gasped. Inside the wagon was a complete mobile painting studio, with an easel that folded up for travel, boxes for her supplies, and even a small tent for shade. "I thought you might like to paint in places farther from the house," Quinton explained. "We could take trips together, you and me, and you could paint new landscapes. Mrs. Chen can watch the children for a few days at a time." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. "You built this yourself, with some help from Thomas." "I wanted you to have the freedom to explore, to find new subjects for your paintings. Just because you chose to stay here does not mean you have to limit yourself." They took their first trip that summer, traveling into the mountains for 3 days. Evelyn painted landscapes she had never seen before, while Quinton made camp and cooked their meals and sat quietly reading while she worked. In the evenings, they would lie under the stars, talking about their dreams for the future, for their children, for the ranch. "You ever regret it?" Quinton asked one night. "Giving up the chance at real fame?" "Never," Evelyn said firmly. "Fame is fleeting and hollow. What we have built together, our family, our life, that is real. That matters." As the years passed, the ranch continued to grow. James showed an interest in the business side of ranching, often riding into Fort Davis with his father to negotiate cattle sales. Emma, to everyone's surprise, inherited her mother's artistic talent and spent hours in the studio learning to paint. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children of their own, and the ranch became a place filled with the sound of kids laughing and playing. Family dinners on Sunday became a tradition, with everyone gathering at the main house to share food and stories. Evelyn's work evolved over time. She began painting portraits as well as landscapes, capturing the faces of the people who made up their community. She painted the ranch hands who worked for Quinton, the shopkeepers in Fort Davis, the families who had settled the area. Each painting told a story, preserved a moment in time. When Quinton turned 50, Evelyn surprised him with a gift of her own. She had spent months working on it in secret, painting at night after he had fallen asleep. It was a massive canvas, nearly 6 feet wide, depicting the ranch in intricate detail. Every building, every fence line, every stand of trees was rendered with loving precision. And in the foreground she had painted their family, Quinton standing strong and proud, Evelyn beside him with a paintbrush in hand, James and Emma flanking them, and in the distance, Thomas and Sarah with their children. Quinton stood in front of the painting for a long time without speaking, and when he finally turned to Evelyn, there were tears in his eyes. "It is perfect," he said hoarsely. "You captured everything that matters." They hung the painting in the main room of the house, where it became a centerpiece that everyone admired. Visitors would stand in front of it, marveling at the detail and the obvious love that had gone into every brushstroke. James married at 24, bringing home a sharp-minded woman from El Paso who quickly proved herself invaluable to the ranch operations. Emma shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to study art in Santa Fe, something Evelyn and Quinton supported despite their sadness at seeing her leave. She returned 2 years later with a degree and a determination to open an art school in Fort Davis, teaching the next generation of artists. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources, cattle diseases that decimated the herd, economic downturns that made selling beef difficult. But Quinton and Evelyn faced every challenge together, their partnership stronger with each passing year. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include everyone in West Texas. The house overflowed with people, and Evelyn stood on the porch at one point, looking out at the crowd, feeling overwhelmed by the richness of the life they had built. Quinton found her there and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different my life might have been," Evelyn said. "If you had not walked up to my paintings that day, if you had not bought them all and commissioned more, if you had not given me a chance." "I think we gave each other a chance," Quinton said. "You brought beauty into my world, Evelyn. You made me see that there was more to life than just work and responsibility. You taught me how to live, not just exist." "We taught each other," Evelyn said, turning in his arms to face him. After 25 years, she still felt her heart skip when she looked at him. His hair was gray now, his face more lined, but he was still the man she had fallen in love with. "I love you, Quinton Bishop. Then, now, always." "Always," he echoed, and kissed her as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that would have challenged even her considerable talent to capture. When Quinton turned 60, he began talking about slowing down, letting James take over more of the day-to-day ranch operations. He did not want to retire completely, but he wanted more time to spend with Evelyn, to travel and see the places she had always wanted to paint. They took a trip to the California coast, where Evelyn painted the ocean for the first time. They traveled to New Mexico and Arizona, exploring landscapes that were both familiar and strange. Quinton proved to be an excellent traveling companion, patient with her need to stop and sketch, enthusiastic about the adventures they shared back home. Emma's art school flourished. She married one of her students, a talented young man from a ranching family, and they built a house near the school. Evelyn loved watching her daughter teach, seeing the passion for art passed on to another generation. James and his wife presented Quinton and Evelyn with their first grandchild when they were in their 50s, a boy they named Quinton after his grandfather. More grandchildren followed, and the house that had once seemed so empty was now filled with life at every turn. As they grew older, Quinton and Evelyn fell into a comfortable routine. They would wake early and have coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Evelyn would spend her mornings painting while Quinton worked with James on ranch matters. Afternoons were for riding or reading. evenings for family dinners and quiet conversations. On their 40th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had been married. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with friends they had made over 4 decades. Thomas stood as Quinton's witness again, his hair now as gray as Evelyn's, his slight limp the only reminder of how everything had started. "I would do it all again," Quinton said during the ceremony, his voice strong despite his age. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time, Evelyn." "And I would choose you," Evelyn replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "You are my greatest adventure, Quinton Bishop, my truest love." When they were both in their 70s, Quinton's health began to decline. It started small, a persistent cough he could not shake, then grew into something more serious. The doctor diagnosed him with a lung condition common among ranchers who had spent their lives breathing dust and working in harsh conditions. Evelyn threw herself into caring for him, just as he had supported her through every challenge they had faced. She set up her easel in their bedroom so she could paint while staying near him. Quinton would watch her work, offering comments and suggestions, their conversations as rich and meaningful as they had always been. "I am not afraid," he told her one evening as the sun set outside their window. "I've lived a good life, Evelyn, better than I ever dreamed possible because of you." "Do not talk like that," Evelyn said, though her hands trembled as she mixed paint. "You are going to be fine. You have to be fine." "Eventually, we all run out of time," Quinton said gently. "But I am grateful for every moment I have had, and I want you to promise me something. Anything. Keep painting. After I am gone, keep creating beauty. Do not let grief stop you from doing what you were meant to do." Evelyn set down her brush and went to sit beside him on the bed, taking his hand. "I promise. But you have to promise me something too. You have to fight. I am not ready to lose you yet." "I will fight," Quinton promised. "For you I will fight." And he did fight, surprising the doctor by rallying and regaining some of his strength. For 2 more years, they had together, precious time they filled with love and laughter and the small joys of everyday life. Quinton passed away peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning, with Evelyn holding his hand and sunlight streaming through the windows he had built all those years ago. He was 76 years old, and he died in the house he had created, surrounded by the paintings of the land he loved, next to the woman who had made his life complete. The grief was crushing. For weeks, Evelyn could not paint, could barely function. But her family rallied around her, just as she had once rallied around Thomas. James ran the ranch with quiet competence. Emma organized meals and visitors. The grandchildren brought laughter and life into the house that felt too empty without Quinton's presence. Slowly, painfully, Evelyn began to heal. She thought about the promise she had made to Quinton, to keep painting, to keep creating. One morning, she set up her easel on the porch where they had shared so many conversations and began to paint. She painted memories. Quinton working with his horses. The 2 of them riding across the ranch. Their children playing in the yard. Their grandchildren learning to walk. Each painting was an act of love, a way of preserving the moments that had made up their life together. The series of paintings became her most acclaimed work. People traveled from all over to see them, moved by the love and loss captured in every brushstroke. Art critics called them her masterpiece, but Evelyn knew they were something simpler and more profound. They were her way of saying goodbye to the man who had changed her life. Evelyn lived for another 12 years after Quinton's death. She remained active, painting almost until the end, surrounded by her growing family. She got to meet several great-grandchildren, to see the ranch continue to prosper under James's management, to watch Emma's art school become one of the most respected in the region. She never remarried. When people asked if she had ever considered it, she would smile and say that she had already had the great love of her life. Nothing could compare to what she and Quinton had shared. On a summer evening, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Evelyn passed away peacefully at the age of 88. Her last words were, "I am ready to see him again." They buried her next to Quinton on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together. At the funeral, Emma read a letter her mother had written, to be opened after her death. "I came to Fort Davis desperate and scared, with nothing but my paintings and my determination to save my brother," the letter said. "I never expected to find love. I never dreamed I would build a life so rich and full. But then I met a cowboy who saw beauty in my work and in me. He gave me everything, a home, a family, a future, and in return I gave him my heart completely and forever. If you are reading this, know that I lived a life filled with love and I died with no regrets. That is all anyone can hope for." The Bishop Ranch continued for generations, each new owner adding their own chapters to the story. But in the main house, hanging in the place of honor, was the painting Evelyn had made for Quinton's 50th birthday. It served as a reminder of where everything started, of two people who found each other against all odds and built something lasting. And on quiet evenings, when the light hit the mountains just right, you could almost see them there. A woman with a paintbrush and a man with a gentle smile, forever young, forever in love, forever home.